good morning, everybody. Good morning. Oh, wait, it's not morning. Wait, this is weird. It's evening. Hope everybody's having a good evening. I hope everybody's had a good day. We have a special visitor with us this evening. Um, my friend and yours, Dr. James Beckett. I appreciate you taking some time to visit with us. Um, really appreciate you coming on. So thanks. Appreciate it.
Happy to be here, Brad.
Yeah, just to let you know, my crew just they like to aggravate me. So it will be a trifecta of aggravation throughout it all. So just a forewarning. So tonight we're going to talk about a little bit, probably about a lot of stuff, but we're going to start off talking about LCS Co-Opps. And the original question was asked on Hobby Hotline, and Dan had asked me my thoughts on it off and on, and I really hadn't studied it and given it much thought. And then he jumped in on Hobby Hotline one afternoon or one morning and asked you and Drew and Sam, and y'all made some comments about it. And then I heard those and heard your podcast, and then wanted to do a little bit more of a deep dive into it. And for those of you who don't know, LCS Co-op, there's a lot of ways that it could go. There's a lot of ways that it's possible for it go. But I kind of wanted to give everybody a baseline, and we're going to go this like really, really quick to help people understand what a co-op is. Because when you think about a co-op, it could be multiple things, but people originally think about the grocery store or vegetable garden or anything like that. And it can be a little bit more complicated than that. So in a lot of words, and I did this so that people could go back and read later. I'm not going to do death by PowerPoint, but different types of corporations, sole proprietorship. And then we've got this International Co-op Alliance. What a co-op basically is done is it's created by people who have a specific need and who are willing to work together to operate and organize a company that will meet that need. All right. So how does a co-op work? You would know it unless you were in one. Typically, is at a grocery store. Likely, people who work there are owners, and it's there to kind of help everybody with democracy, self-help, self-responsibility. I didn't want to go death by PowerPoint, but I did want to give some background. What was extremely interesting and that I learned is even though they do elect a board of directors, one member does not have more weight over the opinion of another co-op member, which was very, very interesting to learn. I did not know that whatsoever. And then members of the co-op or members of the cooperative itself, typically elected by a member vote, and they typically want the speaking of. All right, that's awesome. That is awesome. All right, but what's typical is that you have to be part of the co-op to be part of the board of directors, which was interesting. In a traditional, you don't necessarily have to be an owner in the company to be on the board of directors. So here's some of the benefits: access to certain products, business sustainability, which is one of the comments that you made specifically around if a LCS was going to die, then it could help with business sustainability, community commitment, which I thought was very, very interesting. And I'll talk a little bit more about this as we get into our conversation through financial services, empowerment, equality, diversity, financial. Again, I'm not going to go word by word by word. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, is you've got worker co-ops, producer co-ops, consumer co-ops, purchasing co-ops, and hybrid. And I gave a little bit of examples of each. So worker co-op, I think of a Luby's restaurant or more like a Napa Auto Parts or something like that. I didn't realize REI or Carpet One or anything like that is a Hey, Carl, how's it doing? How's it doing? How's it doing? Yeah, I know, Ken. Thanks. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And then producer, this is like Blue Diamond, or I didn't know Lander Lakes was a co-op, but producer, typical on the vegetables, consumer, grocery store, purchasing co-ops. This is the one I'm more familiar with. With purchasing co-ops, I think of schools. I think of education. I think of a group of people coming together and forming one particular common purchasing unit to drive down pricing. And then hybrid co-ops, combination of any of the four types. So this was a question that was asked, and this is very long. We're gonna go through this. Came across the idea, $100 refundable for a share. Main thing was the grocery store was bought as much from local pharmacists, sold high quality food. For years, they would pay a stronger wage. Here's the LCS part. The public could shop at the store, but there would be specific sales that were members only sales, like when you would go to the grocery store and see the sale price if you were preferred. I really think the LCS owners need to be creative and build up some financial cushion so they can weather the storm in the upcoming years. I think we're seeing the Barnes and Noble versus the local bookstore, Starbucks, local card shop versus possible fanatics versus the LCS. I'm just scared folks need to start innovating and pivoting now. So that's a lot to kind of go over, but I wanted to give a very, very base knowledge of what an LC or what a co-op was so that people could kind of relate. So I did a lot of talking for 7 minutes. I'm going to be quiet and let you give some of your thoughts on that.
Well, Brad, there's some good ideas in there. It's just that it's an idea that perhaps a little bit of a good thing is a good thing. Too much of a good thing may not be a good thing. So I think some of the ideas you put out there, uh, they they could really work on a smaller scale.
Mhm.
But a pure co-op in the fullest sense would be pretty tricky for a local card shop. But a buying cooperative, I mean, those things ought to be existing in the hobby right now, whether they're virtual or
Right,
local.
right.
That makes a lot of sense. And some of the uh, breaking strategies is that somebody's buying the case, and then some people are it's being syndicated or co-ops with some people that say I'm going to take a piece of that, and here's my money, and I'm going to see what I get.
Mhm.
So it's not a terrible idea, Dan. It's a good idea, and the fact that collectors would work together to help their local hobby shop be healthier, that's really a good thing. I'm totally in favor of that.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack as I was going through this. And then listening to yours, your podcast, the $100 a month coming in at the end of in the month to pick up $100 worth of product. That reminded me of if you were to go into a comic book store and say, I want these 10 comic book issues every single month or every single week or whatever, and I'm coming in to get that every single week. So I kept trying to translate it into uh, how it might work for the hobby. You have $100 and then kind of like a grab bag where you come in and you get like a bag in your sub of $100 worth of what's come in that month. Or if you say I've got a box of impeccable coming in at $1,000 and I'm going to do 10 people and we're going to divide the packs. I'm you know I There's multiple ways you could go here on a sub for a on a on an LCS. But any other thoughts around that? Because I was kind of banging my head up against that wall trying to expand that one.
Well, Brad, there's not one way to do it. You're struggling with trying to figure out what's the best way, and the best way would be in the eye of the beholder, of the person that has the shop or the people that want to form a co-op. There's any number of ways you can do it. If anybody that's a member of a country club, you kind of have an initiation fee, and then you have monthly dues. And
Hmm.
some of those monthly dues are like a kind of a guarantee against food purchases, that you're going
Yeah.
to pay X dollars a month, and that's your guarantee. And you can take that out in food, and it's use it or lose it.
Hmm.
So, but not every country club does that. Some country clubs just have dues, but then you get free golf, or you get free swimming, or something else like that. So, but lots of different country clubs have lots of different models. But ultimately, they're figuring out, just like like an LCS would do. This is what it costs to run this place, and
Hmm.
so where are we going to get the money? And if you had 100 people that said, "I'm going to kick in $100 a month, I'm going to guarantee you $100 a month," but to Dan's point, I don't think that could be refundable. It's, I'm going to guarantee you $100. Now, maybe you could let it ride, and if you didn't use it one month, you could use it the next month. But you're guaranteeing them you're going to give them $100 a month of business.
Yeah.
I like that model. Now, it also means that if you're one of those preferred customers, you need to be able to get access to some of the better stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what happens in some of these LCSs, is that the best stuff could get swooped up and taken by somebody that comes in. I'll take your whole allocation of that, and then the rank and file regular good customers don't don't get any of some good product, some hot product. So this would be a way to circumvent that, and so I think it's worth some creative thought.
Yeah. That one I didn't go down that road. So that I appreciate that one. The other one that I liked was your loyalty program for, even if it's not $50. It was like, 20 or 100 or whatever. You get a kind of like a Sam's Club membership where, for $50 or $100 a month, you get a percentage of the discount. And then at the end of the month, whatever you don't get, you could apply towards, or something like that. That was a pretty interesting idea. I like that one, but I'm not 100% sure on the back end how that would work. And again, I have a tendency to overthink things, so, or get a little bit more complicated than I probably should.
Oh,
So
you can make it complicated, but then ultimately somebody's going to say, "This is the setup," and people can say, "Yes, I'm interested," or not. I mean, Costco has done a version of this for many years. You've got to be a member, and the
mhm,
membership is not so much, but you can't buy stuff. I don't think. Maybe you can get like a day pass or something,
yeah,
one off. But generally, Costco is making sure they're making money by their memberships,
hmm,
and then they're selling a bunch of stuff at supposedly a little bit above cost.
yeah, above cost.
What's cost? Yeah.
I really like the crowdfunding initiative that you talked about, if a LCS gets into trouble, you've got where, or even not into trouble, if somebody just wanted to sell off 25% or 30% or whatever, just doing the straight crowdfunding,
Yeah.
and then at the end you've got, I take X portion, and then but wouldn't you have to, like, I don't know. Would you have to become, like, a public company, or just we're thinking too small? I'm thinking too big, and it's just a very quiet. How formal would you have to get for something like that?
Well, there's you identified on one of your slides. There's lots of different ways to have a corporate structure, from a sole proprietorship to a limited partnership to a sub S corporation or a C corp. There's lots of different ways, and the person that organizes it can decide, I want an LLC, or I want a partnership, or I want a limited partnership, and it would be based on the tax advantages and like you pointed out, the governance. How do you vote? How do you decide what to do? When I started a card shop with a couple other guys, the three of us were equal partners, so it took two out of three, and we rarely disagreed. The best thing to do is pick great partners. Then you don't have to
Mhm.
worry too much. But I had great partners, and so we were rarely in disagreement uh, about selling something or whatever. So we were pretty easy going. But if you had 100 co-op members, taking a vote on things could be pretty cumbersome.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if you hold true to the one person, one vote thing. That could become a little
Well, you
converting.
can't buy 2 shares, what happens in the fractional space now is a form of that, is that people are buying, certain shares of a really good card, but they can buy more than one, and then the voting is pro rata. It's based on, the shares that just like in regular, stock market, if you're voting on a proposal, you get a weighted vote according to how many shares you have. But I love the creativity, Dan. I think I just think if I went to Panini or Tops or Upper Deck and I was an LCS and I said, here's my list of 100 customers who have guaranteed that they are going to be consistent customers and they've paid me, uh, in advance this much money so that I want to get enough product from you, the card company, to fulfill these customers. They each want a box, or they each want a pack, or they each want not a case, but I mean, there's some allocation that they really want. For hockey, this is much what we're going to need because so many of them are hockey. For basketball, for football, for baseball, and I think it'd be compelling. Now the problem is you couldn't tell the card companies, and here are the addresses, here are their phone numbers,
Yeah.
because they could jump around you, but if you really had a bunch of, I think that's the fear of the card companies, to give a direct account to somebody that doesn't really have a store, that's really
Yeah.
just gonna flip it online.
Yeah.
But if you really were gonna be a local card shop and get the cards broken up and into the hands of local collectors there that you're really serving, that'd be compelling. I'd try to go the extra mile if I were the card company to try to make sure card shops that had loyal clientele had a regular stream of product. That's healthy for the hobby. And maybe when Fanatics comes in, maybe they'll take a fresh look at that.
Yeah. Yeah. I I thought of it as the main traditional, like for me, being in the IT industry, we had to deal with schools, and in the educational market, you have a bunch of the smaller schools will get together and form a purchasing group, and then from that purchasing group, they would form a contract. Um, let's see. That's an interesting, but you would have to make sure, Tom, that the discounts would be right. That I mean, there's a lot more conversation involved than just to make sure it's an even playing field. To make sure it's an even playing field, because what you go ahead.
Well, the card companies, they want to sell product, but if they were to sell too much to individuals, then it's going to be to the detriment of the card shops. And so if you're in a town that has a good card shop, I think the card company should want you to shop at Triple Cards or Nick's if you're around this part of DFW. If there's some good card shops, and you should go there. Um, but it's just hard to police.
Yeah,
But if you could pick up a box direct, I think people are doing that. If the price is marked up, if the dealers could get it a little bit cheaper or a little bit faster, that's the dilemma we had when we were doing our magazines. Is that the subscription cost and the dealer cost. Sometimes there could be an edge one way or the other, but we tried to make it so the dealers got it at least as soon as the collectors, so the
yeah,
dealers would not be at least not be at a disadvantage.
yeah.
Because we wanted people going to the local card shop. That's healthy for the industry.
And Tom actually owns a small card shop in Longview. So I'm glad that you. Thanks for joining, Tom. Thanks for joining. Um, but I think about taking 100 small card shops across the, like Texas or United or a particular, and banding together and saying, okay, not so much necessarily pooling our money, but we're going to go to either the distributor or to the Panini, Upper Deck, whoever, and saying we want to pool our money together and we want to try to get X percent discount. And for X percent discount, we're going to spend Y dollars. And if we spend over that, we get a bigger discount towards the end of the year, and we can talk about next year. Or if we don't spend that much, then we lose that particular discount, or the discount decreases the next year. If it decreases again, there's multiple things that could, contingencies that you could have.
Yeah.
But the buying power of doing multiple small card shops into one particular agreement number, to me, is extremely compelling.
Well,
Extremely
they're
compelling.
already doing that. I mean, that's basically the role of the distributor. I mean, it would take a lot of card shops pulling together and being contractually connected, which is tricky to have even close to the buying or bargaining power that the big distributors do. So the distributors are fulfilling that role, and I don't think they'd be excited about something like this happen. They want the card shops coming to them, and if you're, I'm not picking on them, but if you're a distributor, hopefully you're being fair in your allocations to the card shops that you service. And if they are faithful buyers, then you ought to try to see if you can get them a reasonable amount of product. If you're taking everything, if you're just waiting for the product that's the sure winner, then and you never took anything else, well, then that's a problem. So I think it's tough. I don't think the card companies want to deal with a group of card shops except through the distributors. And the distributors are in a awkward position
Mhm.
because they get it for a certain price and then they sell it. But if they're expected to get more, they have to go to the open market, and then they've got to pay more, and then they got to mark it up. So you've really got to be savvy to where prices are going.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
I think it's hard. It's hard.
yeah.
It's dynamic. The dynamic is not bad, but I just don't like the local card shops to get squeezed out.
Yeah. And Tom, Tom feels it. He feels the squeeze. I think one of Tom's disadvantages is that he's in Longview. I mean, he's out in East Texas, whereas opposed to you got Knicks or
Yeah.
Triple Cards or one of the others that are there closer to or a larger market. They can just absorb more product, for lack of a better phrase. So that just has a let's see. The main goal was for LCS owners to find a way to build good community so people could go to them versus the big box retail or online. That's a fantastic comment. That's a fantastic comment. And there's various ways to even do that within. I really liked the loyalty program aspect of it. I really like that to be, and then creating a community atmosphere, which if you have that subscription or that buy-in or that type of, and then I think as well, you know, card shops need to do outreach as well. It's not just one way; it's both ways. It's them holding events. It's them having that community. It's having the different types of stuff to pull stuff in or to pull people in. So I think it's a two-way street, and sometimes some hobby shops forget that. At least in my humble opinion, that $3.
Well, the tricky problem, the point that Tom brought up, uh, is that the pricing can be different. If you're a card shop, all of a sudden you're having to pay more. But I think pricing of new card products is a function of time. If you get the first wave, if you get it from the source, the original SRP or the then it works off that. And if it's a bad product, you could get it cheaper later. But lately, so many things have gone up, and so uh, any individual customer that got it direct may have gotten it cheaper if they got it in the original flow than the dealer got from the distributor 2 weeks later,
Yeah,
because they're at the mercy of the secondary market. And again, things generally have been going up, and but it's better, Tom, than if they're going down. If they're going down, then, that means it didn't sell very well.
Yeah.
And that means maybe your customers don't want it. I mean, I would hope they'd still want it because it's a product that's selling for less than the SRP. What does that mean? The Panini and Tops and Upper Deck, they packed it out so that they thought there would be value at that price point. And so if it goes 20% lower, it ought to be a better deal. But if it's people have given up on that rookie class, or they didn't like the design or something, but it can come back in favor, and some rookie that was given up on could later turn out to be great. So
Yeah.
just no sure things.
Yeah. This is and great comment again. Even if a small percentage of the dues collectively went to support little league teams or sports tournament, yeah, outreach is just, in my humble opinion, is lacking in the LCSs, and they could be a lot more proactive.
Again, if you're Panini and Tops and Upper Deck or Leaf or any of them that are considering having direct accounts of card stores, and the application, it ought to be maybe your credit worthiness or your customer base. But like Dan's point, if they're doing things in the community, to me, that's a huge plus, because they're probably going to be around if they're active in the community and giving back. And people are going to come, and they're probably going to have a long-term future in that store. If you're not, then it's just a better way to do business.
Yeah. So Dan reminded me of a situation in the IT community. If someone like HP, Hewlett Packard, if I was a solution reseller of their particular products, I would be assigned some back end money, percentages of how much of HP product that I bought, and I could use those for MDF or marketing development funds towards events or towards community outreach or to advertising or whatever. Is there something like that similar in 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 the hobby or in the where there are back end dollars or something like, I don't know. I'm
Well,
interesting.
we may see, again, with Fanatics coming in, it's going to be a new deal over the next few years. And it might be, if the players associations and the leagues, they may put a higher priority on that. They may require that their people that are getting the product do those things, Brad. That wouldn't be bad. But if they enforced it on everybody, then everybody would say, hey, I got to set aside 10% to pour back into the community. But those licensing entities, I hope they'll take a long-term view, because that is the long-term view that I'm going to build for next year instead of making all the money I can this year.
Yeah.
It's seed corn. It's like seed corn when you're
Yeah.
a farmer. You got to hold a little bit back to plant the next year.
Yeah. Let's see. Tom, major card shops to make the profits off the first wave. Then
Sometimes.
yeah. And then sometimes, I've Al who used to own,
Used to be Al. Yeah.
used to be Al. He and I would have conversations about, he would wait until, you've had that first wave, and then he loved, after the first wave died, uh, prospecting in baseball and buying up some secondary horrible products, and then projecting that he made a lot of money doing it. I may be telling a little bit on Al, but he made a lot of money doing it that way. So you were right. 29 minutes in, and I ran the topic. So we're gonna talk. I did come up with some other stuff for us to talk about. I wanted to make sure that we did have some other stuff to talk about. And there are a couple of kids that do watch the show. This is late at night for them, but they like to watch in the morning. So I'll ask a question that I don't know, I haven't heard you be asked before, and let me know if you have or haven't. What do you think the hobby can do, or what can we do to keep attracting more kids into the hobby other than just building sets for them?
Well, I don't even know that building sets for them is the number one thing. I mean, I think that, all the kids that I've known over the years the little kids want to collect what the big kids collect. They want
Mhm.
to go. And so they want to aspire to that, and they got to work their way up. And so, but to have just a kids product only, I don't think they hold that in high regard. If the adults in their life think, oh, that's just a kids product, it's not a big deal. So I don't, I'm not in favor of a kids product that's dumbed down just for kids.
Mhm.
I'm in favor of a product that's produced in enough quantity that the price is not going to run away, and kids can open and enjoy and occasionally get a good card, but they'd complete a set, or they'd be able to get lots of different versions of their favorite players. So I don't think they have to, get huge grail cards to be satisfied. They ought to start and work their way up. And some of these teenagers and 20 somethings, they're kids to me, they've figured out how to play the game. Just get in the game, start trading up, try to gain an advantage.
Yeah. Tom has a good point, and I'm gonna circle back around that here in a minute, Tom, because I kind of have a question around that. And then, you know, can collecting set collecting is really outdated, to be honest. But what about a trade up program where you get X amount of base cards for a parallel and X amount of parallels for a star player, that type of thing, or some sort of trade up program to kind of entice kids to to come in. Any thoughts around that?
Well, I mean, that's formalizing it to what they're already doing. When I see kids at the shows, they're walking around with their cards that they have, asking the dealers or other people to show, "Are you interested in buying?" And they know exactly what they have in the card, and they they're pretty tuned into the market, so they're looking to trade or sell to a dealer and to gain an advantage.
Hmm.
And it's pretty amazing, and that a lot of dealers, frankly, will give the kids the benefit of the doubt. "Oh, sure, kid, I'll do that." And so they'll make an extra good deal for a kid, and the kid just traded a $100 card for a $150 card, but the week before it was a $50 card for a $75 card, or a $20 card for a $30 card. So I think these kids are smart. They're trying to gain an advantage at each trade, and working their way up. And I think a lot of adults give them the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, I'd like to make a deal with a kid. And the kids, it's not that the kid's taken advantage of. They've done their homework. They're
Yeah,
they're not sentimentally, I do think they're player collectors and they have people they want, but I think they know they're trying to get a good deal. They're trying to trade up, whether it's 2 for 1 or just trade a player that they think is better, and in many cases, they've done more homework than the adult.
yeah, I know. I know.
So,
Aiden just did a deal for $50,000 worth of cards to trade up into one card. So I'm like,
what does
yeah,
that tell you? Well, you wouldn't see 2 adults doing that.
yeah,
So, I mean, kids, if they're resourceful, they find a way, but it's like a grub stake. I mean, you can't get in the poker game that has a $10 ante if you've got a dollar. You've gotta figure out a way to get in the game, and so you've gotta start at the 10-cent game and work your way up.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, I'm going to ask this one. If you don't think it's a great question, you don't have to answer, but I'll ask it anyway, just because I'm curious. What do you think is the hobby's greatest achievement, or what do you think has been the hobby's greatest achievement? And my my goal for this was to try to find, like, is there a defining moment in the hobby where you can point to and say that's a growth period, or that's a growth period, or that's a growth period. You've got the junk wax. You've got. I guess 2020 will be defined as one. But is there one in the vintage, like the 50s or the 40s or even the 60s, that is like that same Kickstarter type event?
Well, what I'd go by, Brad, is and it'd be different metric according to the times, but it's how much has card collecting moved into the public's consciousness. So
Mhm.
have they been on the front page of the sports page or the local paper or the or USA Today? You know, any mentions in major media. You know, how much action are cards getting in the now social media? I mean, it's the more the higher profile of collecting is what I would measure, and it's by mentions. And you know, I'll see somebody and they'll say, "Oh yeah, you did baseball cards, and boy, they sure are hot now." So there's a general awareness, and so I don't, that wasn't there wasn't there was, you know, in the 70s people said, "Oh yeah, I heard there's been some card shows now or something," but it wasn't mainstream. It was just, yeah, it's like that's a legitimate hobby. But
Yeah.
now it's like this is a legitimate business, or it's a legitimate way to make buku dollars, you know, to make a lot of money because that's the headlines you're reading. It
Yeah.
doesn't make it better. It's just what it is. But having greater visibility for the hobby is what I think is important because I said it's the greatest hobby of all time.
Hmm. Is there anything in the 60s that would do that?
Let's see here. I would say get a solicitation call. I can't turn it off because it's my phone. Uh,
I'm glad
in the
I'm not the only
60s, I
one that.
wouldn't say, Brad. I just think the 60s it was very low key, and it
Yeah.
was not a stealth hobby, but it just wasn't that visible. It was kind of underground. People didn't
Hmm.
brag about their collections, and they just enjoyed the fact that they had cards, and they quietly tried to accumulate some more. So hard to hard to get a handle on that. The 70s came out, and you know, it's just been it, and then in the 90s it got real hot, but it got overproduced.
Yeah.
And then but now it's hot and hopefully not overproduced.
Yeah. Yeah. Haven't this is like Dan's again, Dan, just a great comment. I think the hobby saved a lot of people's mental health during COVID. It gave people a purpose and a community at a time when lots of people's lives were rocked. I 100% dead on agree with that. There's a lot of people that I've heard people grew together during the time of COVID through the hobby. I mean, look at all the YouTube shows that were created with multiple people involved. Look at all the communities that were grown. I mean, look at this show. I mean, it started out in COVID, and now we've got, 4, 5, 6 guys, 7 guys that regularly comment, and we've all talked offline, and we've all got each other's where we could reach out to each other. So yes, I 100% agree. Has there been a time, Dr. Beckett, in the hobby where you know that there's been such this community or togetherness in the hobby in the past?
No, there was more togetherness in the 70s because it was so small. It was like an extended family reunion when you went to these card shows.
Yeah,
Everybody knew everybody, and they knew them in person, not just virtually. They were it was a much smaller circle,
yeah,
and so you could know everybody. And then it got kind of impersonal when they had the growth period of the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. And now I think COVID is, you know, increased the desire for people to connect. So yeah, I agree. I agree.
okay. So I was talking with Kyle the other day, Kyle, Dallas Card Show, Kyle, and we were talking about, just the card explosion, and I asked him, dude, what's up with the 1987 Topps Barry Bonds card? And he goes, well, what do you mean? And I'll give you just some statistics here for a second and then ask my question. There's about 16,000 on the PSA pop report, 1,400 tens, 5,000 nines, 7,000 eights, and prices are ranging 400 an average of 450 sold for eBay, and then all the way down to like $30 for an 87 Barry Bonds that was considered like one of the most common cards ever made. That just seems out of whack to me. Where you've got an 87 Barry Bonds going for $400 to $500 for a card.
Uh, I mean, to me, I wouldn't pay that much, but I'm just one person. Apparently, there are enough people who will. But number one, 87, very overproduced, I think,
Yeah.
but not the greatest quality control. So you showed. I mean, the gem rate or the is the cards of the last few years, more than half of them are tens. It seems like, or 9.5s. But
Yeah.
in '87, it wasn't that way, and so that's part of the junk wax. If they open up the wax of '87 tops and they pull out an untouched Barry Bonds, it's arguably what we used to call kind of an RC asterisk,
Hmm.
because '87 really is his first full year of regular issue in the pack cards and not traded or update cards. So, I mean, I can kind of see it, but it just, again, anybody who was around in '87 knows that that is not a tough card.
Yeah.
And to pay a huge premium for a 10 over a 9 over an 8 for a card that, there might be a million of them out there. There's certainly many hundreds of thousands of that card in existence.
Yeah, I'll agree with Tom on this one. I think we need to bring back XRCs, but that's just me. I'm an XRC guy. And Kyle was talking about how many of those cards do we have or was produced. He asked me the question, and I threw out there just a number, 3 million. Let's just say there's 3 million.
No,
Uh,
there's not 3 million. Very
what
honest. No.
what would you think?
But then I doubt there's even 1 million, but there's hundreds of thousands,
Okay,
in the high hundreds of thousands, I bet.
so there's enough. There
There's
might be
enough to
enough.
go around.
Yeah, well, that
Yes,
was
to
my
go around.
point for him was that there's enough there's enough base cards for everybody to have one. So why I don't know. I just found it was odd that a PSA 10 or even just that card would garner more than $5 or with just whatever the going rate is. I just thought it was very, very interesting.
It's supply and demand, and if it was 5 or 10 bucks, people would say, but on the other hand, I don't, would you pay 10 bucks for a raw version? I'm not so sure unless you really scrutinized it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well,
Ben Wilson famously has 6 or 700 '87 Maguires
yeah.
because he's convinced that's in his mind the true rookie card, first card in a in a A's uniform or in a big league uniform.
Yeah.
So I understand that reasoning, but he hasn't had that much trouble accumulating hundreds of those. So they're out there.
Yeah.
They're out there.
Just Bonds go in the Hall of Fame this year.
Wait and see. I don't know. Eventually, I kind of think he has to get in
Yeah.
because he was a Hall of Famer before, just based on before he did what he supposedly did, power and speed, and regardless of what you're doing, hitting the ball on the nose and putting it out and walking, and he's and stealing all those bases back when he was fast. I think he eventually gets in, and so maybe people are thinking that they're going to bid it up because when he goes in. But if it's already bid up, then how much higher can it go up? On the other hand, with his statistics, and some of the things he did were unprecedented, and now they're tainted. But he's still, oh man,
No, I
Good
I
things
agree.
nobody else ever done.
I think I think he gets in on Veterans Committee. I don't think he gets in this year, but I think eventually the Veterans Committee will kind of cooler heads will prevail, and the people who really take a look at the statistics before and after will let him in. I just thought it was interesting because then you've got the people that are waiting for him to get in. If he doesn't get in, what happens to the popularity? Just that whole train of thought that that I thought was interesting. Um, we are talking uh, nostalgia. Uh, what would you, and I get asked this question, so that's why I'm going to ask this question because I don't have a great answer for it. What would you say would be great tools for learning about the history of cards in the 50s, 60s, and 70s? What would be great tools um, for someone who's getting into or returning back from the hobby to learn about what's going on?
Well, I mean, Mike Moynihan has a great podcast of
Yeah.
Golden Age of Cardboard, and he's pretty exclusively dealing with vintage cards from that. There's podcasts out there, there's blogs, there's publications. It might be fun to get an old publication and just look through it, just see what cards used to sell for in the simpler older days. Uh, and yeah, Rich and I do episodes that talk about that stuff, and so there's podcasts, there's YouTube, there's books even. There's some good books out there that talk about. There's the Bubblegum War or whatever it's called. The one talked about the how Topps and Bowman were battling in the 50s. So there's some good stuff out there.
Okay.
Just do some homework and or talk to an older guy, at a show.
I am talking to an older.
Yeah, you bet.
I thought about it for a second, but I just had to let it go.
Yeah.
uh, One last question. We're coming up on it. I want to be cognizant of your time. Um, what was the reason or the goal for starting Beckett magazine? Was it to promote the hobby, to level the playing field on both sides of the table, for what was like when you sat down and started writing? What was the goal for Beckett Mag, or did you even have one?
Well, Brad, of course I had a goal, or I had a direction I was going. I wasn't just aimlessly wandering.
Well,
But
I asked you
I
about
think,
goals the other
no,
day, and
I know, but I'm going in the right direction. But I think the direction I was going with the magazine, the leveling the playing field was more a statement about the first books,
Mhm.
because then there was nothing. And so to put a book that really identified the price of every card in every set in every sport, in the various annual price guide books, that leveled the playing field.
Mhm.
But what the magazines did was provide a dynamic element of movement month to month and drawing people into the card shops to see that this was a hobby that had a dynamic element, that it wasn't just getting your annual price guide once a year. Those were the prices, check back next year. There was more and more of a feeling that what was going on the field and the understood scarcities of the products, led to price increases and decreases.
Mhm.
And so the magazines were more about that dynamic element. The books were more about leveling the playing field. And they were 5 years apart. 79 was the books, and 84 was the first monthly magazine of baseball,
Yeah.
late 84.
I'll let Dan started it. I'm gonna let him end it because he always had some great comments. Last question for me: how can a regular collector on a budget best support an LCS at this time?
Well, I mean, the variation on Dan's idea of the co-op is if that regular collector on a budget let that LCS guy know that, within reason, I got your back. I want you to be successful. I don't have a ton of money to spend, but I'm going to be loyal to you. And if it's the same price on eBay or through some other channel, the tie goes to the LCS. Now, if it's way cheaper somewhere else at a card show or, then you don't have to think, well, I can't buy that. I can only buy from my LCS. But letting your LCS know that if they're competitively priced, you're gonna, as much as possible, gonna try to give them your business.
Yep.
And that's a vote of confidence. That's good.
Yep. And then I'm sure we all have this sentiment. I wanted to share this sentiment because I feel it as well. Thank you, Dr. Beckett, for your contribution and teaching all kids in the 80s about the hobby. So
The kids grew up. I grew up. The kids grew up. Everybody's a little bit older and hopefully wiser. And the hobby's even more fun than it was then.
That's true. That's true. Well, I want to be cognizant. We're gonna cut a little short, but I want to make sure. Any final thoughts or anything before I say the thank yous?
Well, I mean, thank you, Brad, for always being thankful. You have a real heart for people, and it shows. So I think that's good. I mean, a hobby that where people care about each other and want them to have a good experience. That's a hobby that's going to have legs. So keep up the good work.
Well, I sincerely thank you for spending your time with us and giving us of your time. Um, greatly appreciated. Everybody, got any prayer requests? Let me know. I will pray you up. Support your local LCSs and support your local card shows. Thanks, everybody, and y'all have an absolutely fantastic evening. I will see you Friday morning.